Welcome to Voices United, a Congregational song podcast. I am your host, Ben Brody, and in this episode, my guest is Brother Jean Maries of the Taize Community in southern France. Brother Jean Maries is a composer who has responsibilities for planning music and liturgies for the community. Brother Jean Maries and I met in January 2018 at the Community in Taize, France. Welcome to this podcast. At the time of this recording, it's January of 2018, and I'm privileged to get to spend a week at the Taize Community in the countryside in eastern France, along with 19 students from Whitworth University. The Taize Community was founded by Brother Roger as an ecumenical Christian monastic community, and today includes over 100 brothers living both at the community in France as well as several places around the world. Today I'm with Brother Jean Maries, an American brother who joined the community in 1981. Brother Jean Maries is a musician, a composer, and has responsibilities planning and coordinating the 3 prayer services which take place each day at Taize. Welcome, Brother Jean Maries.
Thanks very much.
I'm grateful to get to spend some time with you today.
I'm very happy.
Could we start by having you tell us a little bit about you?
Mm-hmm.
What are your earliest memories of hymns or music in the church?
Well, to be honest, my first memories of music are not so much in church, but at home, because it goes way back. How old would I have been? I must have been 5 or 6. I still remember very well. I remember the record cover also of Eine kleine Nachtmusik by Mozart. And I remember as a kid, it made me jubilate as kind of and I still remember that as a kid. And also I think there were a number of things that my father had been to conservatory, did piano, and he ended up being a professor of sociology afterward, and my mother was also very musically inclined, and so we had a lot of music in the house. I remember also hearing Fidelio very early on, and music back, earliest memories of church music, I think I would be in my teen years, I think. I don't know, for some reason it's funny. I guess maybe a lot of the music I heard because I went to church all that period up straight to coming to here. But I guess a lot of the music maybe didn't make much of a dent in me until in the teen years. And my father was a university professor. It was the university chaplaincy, and it was the 70s, and there was a lot of the St. Louis Jesuits.
Oh,
I
yes.
think there were those songs,
yeah.
And I remember those. I think those were probably the first ones that made a mark on me as far as church music went. Yeah.
All right. Wow. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Tell us a little bit about your faith journey, including how you came to Taize.
Well, as I was saying, I kind of grew up in a family that was church-going, and at the same time very free about, never kind of a sense of obligation about it. It was very much a kind of a nourishing faith that I think I received, and then as I said, there was the parish, university parish, that I was involved in my teen years already. So most of the people there were students, university students, a little bit older, graduate students, also professors, their families, and it was a very stimulating environment, and I think also very young, and I think that helped me a lot to have. I think I grew up with the idea that Christianity is relevant. It involves their young people. And it was vibrant. My memory, the singing, for example, is something of very celebration. It was a kind of the faith received, and in part then very much because of the music as a time to celebrate the Lord, and that's what brought us together. And my first contacts with Taize were kind of through that university parish that had some contacts with the brothers in New York. And so I was during my university years. I was a little bit later. Then I got to know the brothers. And in university, it's the time where I guess still, a lot of people are wondering what's next. What am I here for? What's faith really about? If it's really about something deeply true, then what does that mean for what I do with my life? And those are some of the questions that I guess were hovering around me as I first met the brothers of Taize, and that's what gave me the idea to come here and spend some time as a volunteer to give some room for asking such questions. And so I spent a couple months. I took a year off in college, and as a part of that, spent a couple months here, and that was of course decisive. I guess not everything happened then that set me on the road to becoming a brother, but eventually 2 years later.
Sure.
And of course. That's already many years ago. So and it's an ongoing it's a never ending. They're always. I always love the in Christ. How does Saint Irenaeus says? He says, God brings all newness. You know? Definitely experience that in my life of faith. That they're always new discoveries. And
so, thank you. Tell us a little bit about your role in planning music for the sung prayer of the community.
Yeah. Well, early on, when I arrived, there was the Jacques Berthier was the composer who worked very much with us, was composing the new songs, the so-called Taize songs as they've become known as. And after his death, of course, there was the issue how to continue and how to, and so it was important to continue. So, and then Jacques Berthier was a very special kind of person because he was he was a musician from head to toe. Kind of, he grew up, in a family of church musicians, and it wasn't easy to try to find a way to continue after that. At the same time, we knew we had to. So there was the work with Joseph Gelino, the Jesuit composer, and then about that time, it was in the 90s, Brother Roger felt it was important that there be a couple of brothers who could start. And then he asked a few of us to start working on composing. And so that's how I began. Another couple other brothers did as well. And I was a younger brother who's joined the community just 7 years ago who's doing. It's, I think being here, I think I've benefited a lot from being part of something that, of course, predated me, right? The community is the tradition of the community, and then the work of Jacques Berthier and then working from that and bringing whatever from within, and then the welcome of so many people who keep coming here from many different parts of the world. And
I would imagine it must be helpful. I would think it would be helpful to have such a rich tradition that the community is centered in, and so as a composer, you're creating within that structured sense of what length of a song and repetition and some of those characteristics that seem to have been established with Jacques Berthier that have continued.
Yeah. Well, the image that comes to my mind sometimes is that of a kind of a garden. I think, as a kind of a community or a kind of a church. Hopefully something it's continually growing, but there are things that are there, and then there are things also that can be added, that can be planted, and new things that can be integrated. And there's a whole. A garden is also a question of there's the whole thing as far as but a kind of something very living, and I think it's one of the graces, I think, of the way Brother Roger and the first brothers kind of carried their faith, from the Reformed origins of the community, right? The Calvinist and Lutheran as well, the origins of the community with where they carried a lot of the tradition of hymn singing, for example, but they carried it lightly.
Yes.
I think it was something that nourished them, and which at the same time they were always open to kind of. Brother Roger very much, and to seeing, how can that help people today? Well, we have to adapt. We have to find other ways, but not, of course, throwing out the old ways, right? And so it was kind of a tradition, a kind of a living tradition, which was carried lightly, and I hope that still characterizes the community today.
I think that image of a garden is such a rich, wonderful image for this, and I think is helpful to church musicians in a variety of veins, where we're always looking at what are the traditions, what are those, if you will, plants that are kind of grounding that garden, that are the centerpiece maybe, and then where are the places to add new plantings and look at new design
and then we're in a world that's changing so quickly, and tastes change, and there's a big emphasis. I think it's really difficult. I think now the emphasis on originality, making and for young composers or for anybody in any kind of in any domain, I think people want to make a mark. You have to what's different about what you're doing, and I guess a lot of us can be tempted to kind of push a little bit more on that side, and so sometimes tradition seems a little bit. I guess that's the story of the last 2 or 3 centuries in so many different ways. Kind of the tradition seems to be sometimes a little bit like excess baggage. How can we? It seems to often to. Well, no, there's both. It's very important. And in the community, I think also we use different kinds of music, right? There's also the Orthodox. There are a number of Orthodox Eastern melodies and things that we use in the prayer too, the older hymns, the newer songs, some of the settings of the Psalms, which are some a cappella, some with the organ by Father Gelino, for example. So there's also a varied kind of, it's also, I spoke about a garden, it's also about a good diet, I kind of have to have a rounded diet, not just potatoes or not just meat.
I think that's such a good, I think that's helpful for listeners who have never been to Taize, because I think there's maybe a sense that the only music of Taize are the short repeated chants.
And I remember reading an article a couple of years back about someone who'd come here, a very good liturgist who said afterward that in Taize they only sing Taize songs. And I don't know how, she was here for a couple of days, I don't know how that happened. She got that impression.
But in my week here, we have sung, certainly the brothers sing the psalm at every service.
Yeah.
We've sung Es ist ein Dron, Ross and Sprungen, in French though. We've sung a Protestant hymn. We've sung setting of the Magnificat. So quite a variety.
Yeah. There's that new setting by Silvestrov, the Ukrainian
a more kind of Russian or Orthodox.
Ukrainian, Russian Orthodox, We'll see if we can continue to use it.
So I think that really gets at this, what seemed to be Brother Rogers and continues to be the desire of the community to have this center, but also always be asking what's new that we need to, how do we need to grow in our prayer and what new music can help us to grow.
Well, that's why it's very interesting that someone like you is here and you have groups like yours that are here. And when I don't get to travel enough, but that's one of the things I love about traveling, which is to hear what people are doing. And I guess I don't do it enough, and I regret that a little bit, but can't do everything. But it's always fascinating to hear what people are how they're trying to meet the challenges today of singing and enlivening congregational singing in contemporary communities.
Yes.
And it's a challenge, but it's
enlivening is such a good word for that, I think, as well. It's not manipulating, but enlivening that. How do we encourage? How do we sort of what I think of it as sort of nudge around the edges to encourage the community to raise their voice.
Something obviously has to come. It's the liturgy, prayer is something that comes from the hearts, the ground up, from those who are there. And then of course, at the same time, we all grow up with certain things that we've received, that help us, in our liturgical traditions, the church traditions, that help us to express that. But there's something that has to strike a chord deeply in the people who are present, If they're, and it's not just to give them a good repertoire.
That's great.
And that's why it's important, I think, these layers, another image, piling different images here, but of layers, that they're often in a liturgy and prayer, there are certain layers. There are things which are older, there are things which are newer, and there are things that have just appeared. And I think that's also important, because communities are generally intergenerational, or they should be, The churches. It's a story of transmitting the faith from one generation to the next, and that's one of the big challenges today.
That's great. Could you talk a little bit about, you mentioned that a number of brothers write music for the community. You have far more songs, I'm sure, that have been written than you have space to sing in the course of a year.
Things back in dustbin or something.
And I'm curious, I think this is a challenge for many church musicians. How do we, or how does the community decide which pieces should be sung and which ones are is it time to put on the back shelf for a period of time?
Hit the eject button.
Yes, or that, yes. How do those decisions get made, and what's that discernment process look like?
Discernment process is definitely the word. I think it's something that takes time, because generally in the summer, that's when we try Easter, and then summer mainly, because that's the time when we have most people here. That's when we try to offer up new songs, new compositions, and then to try them over several weeks, And with people are here week after week, and to see how they sound and see how people, how quickly people can enter. And when I say people, it means the people who are in the church every day, the young people who are there for the prayer 3 times a day, the brothers too, obviously, but then more broadly the whole group of people that are there, And how quickly do they enter into it? And then after a few weeks, also, how does it wear? How does it begin to wear on us, you can sometimes you spot right away that there's a problem. There's a problem in this measure, or there's a problem here. There's there's something that people don't hear, and there are several places where people are singing something else. That happens too. Sometimes very embarrassing, but it happens, and you have to take care of that. So sometimes it can be obvious in a week or a couple of weeks, but then sometimes it takes more than that. It takes a few months or maybe even a year or two to hear if something really holds. If something can you continue singing that? And maybe that's kind of the test of. We pray 3 times a day. We don't sing the same songs 3 times a day, but we have prayer 7 times a week, and it's it's a monastic community, so it has to pass the test of time a little bit, and so there's several of us who who work on music and are involved in preparing the prayers. And Brother Alois also is a musician, very good, excellent guitarist. He's also very much at the heart of that. Brother Alois is a prior, and so I guess he would have a kind of a final say on things. But at the same time, it's a process where we're going to listen a lot and often talk to one another about how things are working, and often a consensus emerges about what works and what isn't working so well.
Yeah.
Almost always.
Okay. Yeah. I like that. I think often in American churches there are tensions over who makes the decision. Is it the pastor? Is it the church musician? But I think and obviously somebody ultimately has to make a decision.
Right, yeah. I don't want to idealize what happens here but I think living together obliges us. It's first of all an opportunity to talk about things on lots of occasions. Yeah. It could be in the sacristy right after we've sung. I try to avoid that. I try to avoid doing it immediately afterward, after we sung something. But it could be walking down the church, or it could be over breakfast, or it could be just a little conversation next to the photocopying machine or something. And then you hear tidbits from other people, and little by little, because of that, I think you begin to develop a sense about something. And that's a big help. And of course, the big challenge, and I think that's where Jacques Berthier was such a great example. And he, wasn't a member of the community, but was a person who was a real artisan in the sense, somebody who was able to say, well, okay, it doesn't work. Let's see, what can we do to make it work? And if it still didn't work, he said, well, okay, fine, let's not use it. And so he had a very light ego, and that's very important. I guess you have to be very humble. I remember a very good singer telling me that once. You have to be very humble.
And I think it's so fascinating in my own setting in my congregation. I'll sometimes introduce a piece that I know has worked well in what I thought was a similar setting, and we'll sing it for 3 or 4 weeks, and I'll realize this just is not settling into this community. So each community is really different.
Also, and then when we travel, of course, to different places and have meetings elsewhere. We just had a meeting in Switzerland. Well, that's very close to France. It's not culturally, it's not very different, of course, and it was an international meeting, but still largely European. But then if we have a meeting a year and a half ago, we had a meeting in Benin, in Africa. So, well, there you're not going to use the same music as here, right? And you're going to have to, or now we're preparing a meeting in Hong Kong for August, right? And it's going to take a while to come up with a repertoire that's going to work for 5 days of prayer in Hong Kong, mainly with Chinese young people, and from mainland China, perhaps from Hong Kong, from Taiwan, Korea. It's going to take some doing. We can't just roll out the same things that we sing here always. Yeah.
How do you? That's actually, I think, leads me to another question or two. I know from the prayers that Brother Alois offers up that often the prayers are responding to, in some way, to events in the world.
The world situation of today.
Sure. Yeah, and how, as a musician and as one who helps to plan those services, how does that affect the planning that you do?
Yeah, well, that's a very important question. Yeah. I don't think you can prepare it by keeping one ear, on the news, and then one ear on whatever you're, doing, or kind of. I think you need a kind of a healthy detachment, to kind of to be creative. And I hear that often on the part of. The other day I was reading something about a youngish American author. novelist who wasn't on Facebook, who didn't have a Twitter account. She's written some she's written some books to some acclaim these last years, and she spends her summer in Italy on a few months in a place where she's not going to be disturbed, and I think, well, I guess we're all very different as far as that goes, but I think there is a certain amount of detachment which is necessary, in the positive sense, freedom, a certain freedom. At the same time, we need to be, we're living in the world, we're all living in the world, and Taize, as far as we seem to be here from, well, we are from big cities, we're in the world, and so the prayer needs to be in dialogue with what we're living and hearing and seeing today. Yeah. And that for us, I think it's often in the prayer you mentioned, Brother Alois writes especially a prayer at midday, which in some way, as you suggested, kind of reflects in some ways present day concerns. It also, I think, appears in some of the intercessions that we, which are different each day, there are always 2 intercessions each day which respond to present events. And and it's all to... What is the attitude of there are lots of stances that are in our stances, or a lot of kind of inner, the best word, kind of when we pray, the Psalms speak in so many ways. There's praise, there's lamentation, there's and all that runs between. And I guess it has to help us stand, the prayer in some way. And so somehow if we're to be bringing all that the world is living in some way or another, implicitly at least.
Yeah. And the silence, I think. The
silence very much. You feel that. I think a lot of people feel that here, that in fact in the silence there are all the things that people are undergoing, the world is undergoing, which sometimes can't be said almost, right? Or experiences. You know that in a church full of 300 people, there are people there who are probably going through things that are very hard, that they can't put into words. Yeah. And it's powerful to be together in silence. You don't feel that. You maybe have a sense that that's the case, but all of that has its place in the prayer for us. Yeah.
When you write new songs, what does that process look like for you?
For me personally, it's always, I think, words that are the beginning. Words are the beginning. I always have the sense that biblical, generally, there may be some other, there may be some other texts that can use, or words, and then of course the cadence of the words needs to be, it needs to be poetry in some sense, not poetry, it has to be verse, right? It has to be something where there's a regularity, rhythm, and I think when you start listening to the words, you realize I always sense there's a music in the words. Yeah. There's a music in words. And you sense that very much with different languages. Often we're here with lots of different languages, and we have to be careful about, bending languages in ways, so you have to be careful about, really hearing things. And so we benefit a lot from those who come from the countries with the music that we sing and compose, obviously, But to hear the music in words, and then the music, because there's a rhythm. And because they're accents, and then you're very close to music, and then you're very close to a melody. And once there's a melody, there's also something behind it. There's a feel to it, right? There's an atmosphere, and then you're already speaking about harmony in that case, right? And so kind of one thing then leads, I guess, from the words into a music, which is melody, and harmony and atmosphere. Yeah, something like that.
I know you write English texts. Do you write for text in other langues as
also,
well?
Portuguese, Lithuanian, Polish, but with great, not trepidation, but with trying to take great care, even in English, because English is English today is, in Taize, it's a language that's used by people from lots of different parts of the world. There's English and American English. I think when it comes to singing, there's maybe there are spelling differences. There's certain things, of course, which you have to keep in mind, right? And you don't feel it that much, but I guess we try to keep the English open enough also for people. A lot of people use English today, which is a second language. So often have that in mind when we're composing things in English.
Yeah. Keeping maybe simpler words and...
Maybe, or being aware that there are people who are going to be singing this who are not who don't have English as a first language.
Yeah.
Which doesn't mean abridging necessarily or cheapening but just being aware of that, I think. Yeah, being aware. Yeah. But that's part of our context. I think it's maybe I think it's part of probably the US in some ways too. Yeah, but no. But a language has to be rich. I don't want to suggest that we have to do something to the contrary. Yeah.
What do you see as the role of congregational singing in worship?
Yeah.
And what does Taize prayer have to offer to the wider Christian church?
That's a big question. Yeah, congregational, I guess that means what? Congregating, coming together, right? Which I think is really what church means, right? Which means bringing together, welcoming, being welcomed before God, allowing God to welcome us, welcoming one another in God's presence. So it means, I think it's part of the very raison d'être in music.
Yeah.
There may be tastes, which differ from one person or one generation to the next, but at the same time, we're always looking for things that are going to be helping us to sing together. And I think one of the aspects of that too, of course, is singing in voices, which I guess is an issue today. I think increasingly an issue, right? Maybe today we want everybody to be singing, right?
Yeah.
Not just the choir, and not everybody reads music. I'm always, every time I go back to the US, I'm always impressed at the level in general, the musical level in churches across the board. I think there's a lot of care in general, and a very high level, I think, in general. But with the kind of music that people listen to generally, I guess, right? That's the challenge too. Is the kind of we get divided by taste. We get divided by this is old fashioned. By the way, or that's new, that's interesting, and maybe it is for some people, but maybe not for everybody. Who you're leaving behind. So it's part of what I think the church is about, a community is about. And at the same time, I guess today it's kind of where we feel that we're being pulled in lots of different directions. And
I would imagine many in the U.S. would agree that sort of the lack of musical the level of musical literacy has dropped in recent years.
Yeah.
At the same time, I think that is one of the important gifts of the Taize chants, is that they become a way for young people or any people to learn to read music, because they're short. The parts are generally pretty easily learned and sung, and you can start singing just the melody, and eventually, fourth or fifth repetition, you can try out a part. And so I think that's been, as I've perceived, one of the real gifts of this music is that it helps. I notice this with my students. It helps them, ones who would never think they could sing in parts. At the end of a week here, feel like, I can do this. I've tried that. I can listen for a while, and then I can pick it up.
That kind of initiation, and so that you're talking about, that's very important. Yeah, it reminds me of someone who was, I think she's from Texas. She worked with, she's working still with children's choirs, and she liked the Taize songs for working with the younger one. I think it was 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-year-olds, and kind of initiating them into singing by parts, right? And then spoke a lot about the intervals, and also then the beauty of polyphonic. That's a kind of a fancy word for most people, but for musicians, it's the beauty of polyphony. And she said that there were often lots of experiences that children would start to speak a lot about all sorts of things, because they were touched by the beauty of the parts. But I think we live today in a world where people like to sing a lot. I think in general, our experience of the young people is that they like to sing. So the thing about musical literacy is definitely true. At the same time, I think there's a great thirst on people to sing, but they don't always realize that there's a kind of joy to be found in singing together. And I think that's part of the wonderful thing that can happen. I think when given the right circumstances, given the right kind of music, and taking people in the right way, and not making them feel as if they're stupid.
I think that's such a great observation, and I think in North America, we've seen such a decline in communal opportunities for singing. I think 50 years ago there were many more opportunities where people would gather and sing a patriotic song together
Sure.
or sing Christmas carols, and you
It's
have
a minefield today.
yes, and it's it's so much more rare for that to happen, other than perhaps singing the national anthem or take me out to the ball game at a baseball game.
Yeah, it'd be very hard to get a group of Americans together and to find something that everybody knows. Probably the Star Spangled Banner, but
So I think you're right that there's a hunger for this, and sometimes that hunger isn't even being met in their churches.
No.
Either because maybe the music is too difficult, or I don't know what, but certainly that seems to be something that people find when they visit here.
Yeah, I think what was the expression someone used some years ago? They were saying that the music here is it's kind of bridge music for some people, because it's because we're kind of, I don't know if I'm too meant that they're two sides of the river, but kind of know that there's the older, and I guess Taize does draw from a kind of the classical musical tradition, a lot of the things, the harmonies and Latin, English, and all the rest, and then the new, in the sense that the young people like to sing it because it's rather melodic and bridge music. I guess that's kind of what maybe doesn't sound very attractive. Well, bridges can be very beautiful, can't they? But I guess that's important today. You have to try to bridge.
Well, that brings us to a question that I've been wondering. What, as you've spent some time visiting other churches, but certainly in your experience welcoming and participating in prayer with people from around the world, what are some signs that you or aspects in the landscape of worship that you find encouraging, and what are some aspects that maybe concern you?
Mm-hmm. That's an easy question. What can I say? I guess the musical literacy issue that you raised is definitely a concern. Yeah, and I guess going along with that, the tendency or the ease with which then we could just kind of want to do things which are easy for people, right? And not challenge people in positive ways with things, not ask a little bit more of them, and find melodies that are just singable and sound good immediately to the ear, and I guess that's a concern that lots of things are maybe being lost. But at the same time, I'm very positive. I think that people, I think overall, we see, at least here, very much, and when we travel, that people are, Christians of different backgrounds are many at least, maybe not all, but many are open to receiving things from other traditions, and praying in other churches. Again, I would say that's everywhere the case, but I think there is an openness to congregating, to coming together, which is very, very present. At the same time, I guess there's also the thing that's driving us apart, right?
Yeah.
Which for various reasons, which is true, I guess, politically, socially. I guess in some ways, speaking about music, I think we see a lot of the things that we're saying could be translated almost immediately to other aspects of the world we're living in today.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, divisions that seem harder to bridge than they maybe were in the past.
Anywhere. Yeah. But at the same time, you see this very strong desire to overcome that on the part of many people, and people who divide are never very happy. So there must be something deeper than the desire to divide, and if people aren't happy in doing it.
Well, I think that's one of the great gifts of this community, not just in the music, but in the community life itself. Is that uniqueness about this place in bringing together groups that might otherwise be divided, and yet there is space here for conversations that lead towards greater unity.
Right. Yeah. Well, the vocation to reconciliation, to unity, which is the heart of what the community, I think, is really, it's expressed in many ways in what happens around music, what we're saying now about music, and also when people are in the meetings here, when people people still bring guitars and start singing, or will sing songs for one another, or conversations that will continue into conversations, and the music and conversation kind of go back and forth, don't they?
I think that's I love that you pointed to that aspect of music outside of prayer that
people
happens
sing a lot
so
here
commonly
outside
here.
of prayer. And they sing the songs that they bring with them. They sometimes sing songs that young people in general know, coming from different countries, but also very often there'll be a Spanish group that's singing some Spanish music under the tent, and then there are other people who kind of congregate and are interested in. And young people in general, I think, are like that, and I think that's There was many Ukrainians coming these last couple of years, and we've had a kind of a Ukrainian tea, we call, where the Ukrainians can sing some of their music, or some of the Belarusians also who have been here these last years. And the young people come and they listen, and other people, I mean the non-Ukrainians, and they love it. And I think that's a great side of the world in which we live today.
That's wonderful. Well, Brother Jean Marie, it's been so wonderful spending this time with you, and I wanted to close with 5 short questions that my intention is to ask of everyone that I interview.
Sure. Shoot.
Which song has most shaped your faith?
I don't think I could give one. There's so many. Yeah, I'm hard put to say. I can think of composers. I think, and certainly Mozart. Mozart and Bach. But then, having said that, I don't know, music has often been a kind of been such a part of the kind of the atmosphere in which I've grown up, and continues to be, that it's hard to pinpoint one thing. But just at lunch now, we were listening to the Art of the Fugue by Bach, and well, it's not a song, is it? But it sings.
Yes.
It sings.
Yes.
It sings. And I love, we don't quite say that really in English, do we? It's kind of, but that when something begins to sing, you know, that you get that sense, even in instrumental music. And that's what I like. And so the answer isn't a direct answer, sorry.
No, that's great. What song do you turn to for comfort?
Yeah. Well, actually, I'm a little bit hard pressed, I think, but...
Or composer,
I think a lot about, somebody, I think of Schubert, for example, that there's this wonderful quality in some music you can hear where it can be very, at moments, Schubert, Bach has that also. Many composers have this, but it's very remarkable in Schubert. There can be very tortured moments, and he gives expression to that. And at the same time, at the end, things resolve, and resolve beautifully. Yeah. And that's the kind of music that I turn to for consolation, because I think there's always a bit in the Art of the Fugue today. We're listening to that it's very grave at certain moments, but there's a beauty there that's really and it ends in the light. It's in the light as well. So I don't know. I guess it's the kind of music that consoles me. Yeah.
I think it's fascinating that your answers to both of these questions, as somebody who writes songs with words, are both instrumental pieces. Yeah.
Well, yeah.
If you had to name one favorite piece of music, what would that be?
Well, I spoke about Eine kleine Nachtmusik from when I was little, and sometimes I still listen to that. And there's something about the things that gave me the greatest joy when I was little, which continue to do so. A number of Mozart's operas, Magic Flute, Marriage of Figaro. My taste inclined to 18th century, I guess, in some ways. But at the same time, I'm very happy when someone puts on some of the music that I listened to when I was in the set that I grew up with in the 70s and the 60s. I love some of the things from that period. Also the kind of the happy insouciance, the kind of the happy, kind of carefree. And then there's so many things. Joan Baez can be beautiful. Yeah. It's wonderful.
That's great.
My answers are terribly vague.
No, that's fine. What book, obviously other than the Bible, has most shaped your faith or influenced your vocation?
Oh, there are lots. There are lots of things. Lots and lots of things. I'd probably say all of Tolstoy and also all of Dostoevsky. That sounds a little pretentious, but I'm reading now someone that's it's a 17th century Jesuit author, Surin, who speaks about contemplative prayer and how the love of God seeks in us to take more and more room. A little bit, one of the images he uses is a river, and the water seeks to broaden, the riverbed, and it's very beautiful. It's reading now that nourishes me greatly. Well, the rule of Taize obviously is very, very important, has been important for me. It's a very short text that Brother Roger wrote in the 50s, which continues to nourish us and gives us, I guess, together with the Gospels, gives us the two, and the Bible, the two, something to hold in both hands to orient us.
Yeah, great. And then last, what song would you like to have sung at your funeral?
Well, I don't think I'm not the one who's going to be thinking about that. I'm very happy that there are other people. But I hope when my funeral happens, I hope I'll be singing at least Misericordias Domini in aeternum cantabo. For all eternity I will sing of your mercies, Lord.
Oh, that's lovely.
Or something like that.
Well, Brother Jean Marie, I want to thank you again. This has been a real privilege to get to spend this time together.
Thank you very much. Me too.
All right.
Me too. Thanks very much.
Voices United, a Congregational Song podcast, is produced by Ben Brody with support from the Hymn Society in the United States and Canada and Whitworth University. Special thanks to the Center for Congregational Song for publicity and technical expertise, and Whitworth University student Taylor Heath for editing and production.